إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Friends, assalamu alaikum. My previous video was regarding Ikhwan al-Muslimun, this group known as the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a political movement that seeks to acquire political power in Muslim countries, particularly in the Arab world, where it has its origins and it is functioning till this day in various affiliates that are loosely affiliated with each other. The main branch of the Muslim Brotherhood is located in Egypt, where at the present it is being severely repressed, and it is a banned illegal terrorist organization according to Egyptian law. And the Muslim Brotherhood has spawned a lot of offshoots or copycat groups as well in other parts of the Muslim world. And one of those groups is the organization known as Hizb ut-Tahrir. Hizb ut-Tahrir, in English that means the Party of Liberation. This is a political party founded by an individual named Taqiyuddin al-Nabahani. Nabahani was formerly a member of the Ba'athist Party in Syria, I believe. And this individual, Nabahani, he was a person affected by the ideology of Baathism and of fascism and of revolutionary communism, Leninism, Marxism, all of these isms that basically came from 20th century Europe, and along with the fact that he was a modernist like Hassan al-Banna, like the Ikhwanis. The Ikhwanis is the term referring to those who are members of or supporters of the Ikhwan al-Muslimun, Muslim Brotherhood. So Hizb ut-Tahrir differs in Ikhwan al-Muslimin in some respects. And in fact, it is much more dangerous and much more evil than the Muslim Brotherhood. Hizb ut-Tahrir is a group that wants to establish a global khilafah. And the means through which they seek to establish a global khilafah is through stealth, through military coup. So their modus operandi, their MO, is to recruit military officers, high-ranking military officers, recruit them, brainwash them into the ideology so that they become secretly members of the party. And then when they are in a position that these military officers will launch a coup d'etat, seize control of the country, and then implement the program of Hizb ut-Tahrir. And this way they seek to establish a global caliphate. But to establish a global caliphate, you have to start somewhere in some particular country. So wherever they are first successful in establishing through a coup d'etat, establishing their regime basically, then they will start their khilafah from there, and then they will seek to expand it and make it into a global, worldwide Muslim caliphate. This is the basic agenda of Hizb ut-Tahrir. Totally against the way of the prophets of Allah, against the teachings and the philosophy of our religion, Islam. This is a philosophy and ideology that comes from Europe, that comes from fascism, that comes from Marxism and Leninism, and from Baathism. The Ba'ath Party is a party in the Arab world, this neo-fascist party that was founded by a Christian Arab named Michael Aflaq, if I'm not mistaken. So here's a party, the Ba'ath Party, that has no religious connotation, no religious kind of coloring to it, is totally not Islamic, And two of the worst dictators that have ever, risen in the Muslim world, in the Arab world. One was Saddam Hussein, that Taghut, who by the grace of Allah was hanged and executed for his crimes. And another Taghut who is still alive, unfortunately, regrettably, Bashar al-Assad. He is also a member of the Ba'ath Party, and his regime is a Ba'athist regime. So we see that how the Ba'athists, when they were successful in taking control of Iraq and Syria, how they ruined those countries, how they persecute the Muslims in the name of this Arab socialist fascist blended ideology. And that Hizb ut-Tahrir is, in terms of ideology and in terms of modus operandi, is very similar to the Ba'ath Party because it has its roots in Ba'athist ideology. This is something that the Muslims have to totally realize about Hizb ut-Tahrir. Now, Hizb ut-Tahrir is banned in virtually every single Muslim country because part of their program, part of their ideology is that they do not recognize the legitimacy of any single Muslim government in the world today. They don't recognize the legitimacy of any government, no matter how Islamic or secular it is. For them, it makes no difference. If it is not a government of their political party, of their ideology, they consider it to be an illegitimate government, and their aim is to overthrow that state. Their aim is to overthrow every single state in the Muslim world, every single government in the Muslim world. This is naturally why this is a political party that is banned and proscribed in virtually every single Muslim country. I think maybe there might be only a handful, such as perhaps Indonesia, where this political party is allowed to operate. Now, the thing about Hizb ut-Tahrir is that this is also a political party which claims that Islam itself and that the Muslim Ummah is itself a political party, that Islam is a political ideology, and that the Muslims are a political party, and that the very objective of Islam is simply to establish a Khilafah, a global Islamic empire. And this, of course, is totally a historical revisionism, a rewriting of Islam, a revision of the religion of Islam, the fundamental teachings. And it is a consequence of this Marxist materialism, this poisonous ideology that infected the minds of a lot of our 20th century so-called Muslim intellectuals. Taqiyuddin Nabhani was one of them, but also Sayyid Qutb and Abul Ala Maududi, and from among the Shia, this individual named Ali Shariati. That all of these people were affected by the virus of Marxism and materialism, and also modernism, and also Leninism. Leninism is basically a form of Marxism which seeks to implement a Marxist revolution through violence, and not through the peaceful political process of democracy, etc. So the Leninists influenced Sayyid Qutb to the extent that Sayyid Qutb wrote a manifesto called Milestones, Ma'alim fit Tariq, in which he said that there should be a vanguard, and that this vanguard of Muslims, this elite class of Muslims, should work to create an Islamic revolution through violence. And once this Islamic revolution is established, then they establish a Khilafah, etc. And Hizb ut-Tahrir basically agrees with this method. So Hizb ut-Tahrir says that the Khilafah is the end-all be-all of Islam. It's all about the Khilafah. It's all about having a Khalifa. It's all about having this global empire. But actually Islam, if you study the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his objective was not to establish a government or a state. That was incidental. That was something that was coincidental. That it occurred that he was found himself in a blessed position where he was in charge of a state. Otherwise, his function as a prophet, his objective as a prophet, was simply to convey the message of Allah and to establish Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, in worship, and to bring an end to idolatry in the earth. And so he succeeded in that. The establishment of a state as a means of obtaining that objective was simply coincidental or incidental. It was not part of the objective itself. And it is possible that Islam can be established and Tawheed can be established without necessarily bringing that about through having a polity or a state. And this we see from many of the other prophets of Allah who came prior to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that none of their objective was to seize political power. If we go back to the Prophet Moses, for example, ala nabiyina wa alayhi salatu wassalam, when he went to Pharaoh, he never told Pharaoh that that Allah has sent me to occupy the throne, and that I should be the Pharaoh instead of you, and that your regime is illegitimate, and that your government, your empire, I have come to dismantle it. Rather, he told the Pharaoh that Allah has sent me to take Bani Israel with me so that we may go to the promised land, the Holy Land, and worship Allah. That was his message. It was not a political agitation. It was not a political uprising against the Pharaoh of Egypt. Not at all. And so this is something which we got to understand. And once we understand this basic, when we get this narrative set right, when we get the story set properly, then groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, groups like Jamaat Islami, groups like Tanzim Islami of Dr. Asrar Ahmed, or the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, or some of these other so-called Islamic political parties, all of these groups, all of their wasted potential have been unveiled once and for all. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.